This is the best way that I found to store leftover paint. It might also be the weirdest because it's a syringe. These syringes come in packs of 3s and they're sealed. So here's one that's not used. It's 60 milliliters and a 2-ounce tube is 59 milliliters. They're airtight when the cap is on. So when I pull on this, it creates a vacuum in there, and when I let go of it, it just pushes it back in. So this should work just as well as a paint tube for keeping your paints fresh. So let's get right into this. I'll show you how to fill this up. This is my Masterson Stay Wet palette. I have some leftover paints from my previous painting, and I want to save these for future use. I'll put some gloves on because this can get messy, and it makes cleanup much easier. You can use a palette knife to scrape up your leftover paint, but I've been using these Princeton Catalyst scrapers to scrape up my palette. This one is probably 8 years old, but I bought this entire set of the different shapes and sizes. So let's give that a try. Makes it easy to scoop it all up, and then you can just mix it all up into a gray. The color that you end up with depends upon what colors you put out on your palette. It also depends upon how much of each color you put out. So if you have a lot of phthalo blue on your palette, this will definitely be more on the blue side. This looks a little bit greenish. If you really want to scrape up all the extra paint, use a safety scraper. This stuff over here might be a little bit dry, so I don't think I'm going to include that into the syringe. You could probably put a new razor blade in here. The end might get a little bit dried up, but you can see I just squirted that out and it's still wet. What I have in there seems to be more gray than what I currently have, but that's okay. So what you want to do is pull the plunger out slowly so you don't make a huge mess. And then you just simply scoop your paint up into the back end of the syringe. You can use a palette knife and just scrape it in there. There's a small chunk of dry paint here. I'll just scrape that right off. And then what you need to do is insert the plunger back into the syringe. You want to be careful that you don't push it in too quick and have all the paint squirt out of it. And I think it helps to tap it a little bit. That way the paint settles to the bottom and all the air bubbles will be at the top. And when you press this up, the air will push out and it'll just be mostly paint in here. So you want to keep the tip pointing upwards and slowly push it back up. And you want to stop when you get a little bit of paint coming out of the top, like so. Then you put the cap back on and you're good to go. I've stored this paint in here since April and it's now the end of July. So you can see April 15th and today is like the 26th of July. So there's a few things I thought of when I was using this, and that is, if you keep filling it up, you'll end up with different mixtures of gray in there. And I don't mind that, but if you want all the same color, that's pretty easy to do. I'll show you how to do that now. So all you would do is take the cap off, squeeze out all the paint, and then mix it together, which I think it was pretty similar to begin with, but this way I'll have all one color, which I think is a little bit more useful. And then you would just scoop it back into the syringe like I showed before. If you want to clean it out, you can do that too. This is actually the first time I cleaned it out, so you don't really need to do it that often, I don't think, but if you want to, I'll show that you can do it. And that's where I think these spatulas come in handy, because you could insert it into things like this to scrape out paint. Then you could just rinse this out in like a bucket. I've got a bucket of water and I'll just soak the parts in here and scrub them out. You can also insert the plunger and run water through it. You can just suck up some water and squeeze it out. That already looks cleaner. These are also good around the house for getting water out of tight spaces. You can also use a rag to wipe off some of the paint. Put a paper towel around that spatula so I can get inside the syringe. Here it is all cleaned out. It's definitely easier to clean out under a sink, especially the nozzle part. Now that it's all cleaned out, I just need to fill it back up. The only part that really gets messy is this end part, because that's where you fill it up. But you can just wipe that off with a rag when you're done. So now that it's clean, you'll get a better idea of how this works. Just insert the plunger in here and you can see most of the air is at the top. So when I press this in, it escapes through the nozzle. You can also, like I said, tap it down. There's just a tiny amount of air at the top here. It's less than you would see in a tube of paint. I like to get the paint all the way to the end of the nozzle so that there's no air at the top. And then that's all airtight. If you look at the measurements on the side, I saved about 26 milliliters of paint. That's paint that won't dry up on my palette or go into the garbage. I can reuse this in future paintings. I feel like these syringes are better than these metal paint tubes. I made a video before where I showed how you could flip your own paint tubes. The problem with these is that it's kind of messy and you have to keep buying these over and over again. And once you crimp the end of it, there's no easy way to open this up and refill it. With the syringe, you could just keep taking the plunger out and filling it back up. So I've used this probably half a dozen times already, and I never had to replace it. The cost of one of these syringes is about the cost of 2 of these paint tubes. So using the syringe twice will pay for itself basically. And this seems to last a lot longer than one of these because like I said, you have to keep throwing these out. Please like and subscribe if you found this video useful. Up next, you can watch my video on how I set up this glass palette. Thanks for watching.